Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
Oops, sorry about that. I guess it helps when I bring myself into the equation here, huh? This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. First of all, it is Wednesday, the 27th, and I'd like to let you guys know that I have a very special guest for you this evening. If you haven't read the description, read the description real quick down below while I do these announcements. All of the links and everything else that pertains to this episode will be in the description. All of the links that are relevant, I'll be flashing them up as well as we go through the conversation. But one of the things is, if you are watching on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe down in the corner and thumbs the video up. That would help out a lot. If you're watching on Facebook, please share and like. If you're on the podcast platforms, which this will be releasing to this evening or tomorrow, do me a favor and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, because that helps me become more visible on the podcast platforms as well. Couple of things that I've noticed, and one special shout out I want to give to Suzanne Riley, who donated $50 to the show. Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so let's get to the episode. We will be talking to Dr. Carmen Johnson. Let me bring her in here. Hello, Dr. Carmen. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Today's been kind of a hectic day for me, so I'm kind of a little bit scrambled, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, I wasn't aware. The little bit I heard of your story just now when I was waiting in the waiting room, I am just so impressed with you. I'm absolutely impressed with you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And how you and I got to meet was I do a Sunday evening. What was it? It was like a reentry type of criminal justice sort of group that we just come together to talk about best practices or different things that James Jones, who actually runs that, and Maurice Clifton, and Lisa Riley too. She's another big part of that. We just talk about, different things, try to people who have been wronged or wrongfully incarcerated or going through things in incarceration that are detrimental or just not right. And so I was listening to your story because I tuned in that one week, and it definitely ties in with something that I had been covering probably 6 months ago with the con. And I was able to screen that true crime documentary series, and that was all about the 2008 financial crisis, and everything that The Big Short didn't tell you, pretty much, and the whistleblowers and everything else. And your story kind of piggybacks off of that, because it was the back end of everything that happened because of that. The moratoriums that you created or were helped people stay in their homes as they were being illegally foreclosed on. And but I'm going to let you tell that story because that's definitely something that needs to be heard.
Yeah, so first of all, like you said, we met through Mr. Jones, Mr. Clifton, and Miss Riley, and I give my thanks to them for helping me get my story out. And like I just said to you, I'm just amazed at the brief clip that I heard of your story, and we really have to talk, when we get time. Very fascinating. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am the former housing chair for the state conference NAACP of Maryland. And some years ago, I was trying to get a moratorium to freeze the illegal foreclosures that was going on in the state of Maryland. And these illegal foreclosures were really hitting the Black communities really, really hard. Now, I'm fully aware that these illegal foreclosures were happening all over the United States, but at that time I lived in Maryland, so my focus was on Maryland. And as I was going through the process of trying to get an understanding of what was really going on, when I got all the way down the rabbit hole, I realized what was really happening. And it's funny because the clip that you send me is called The Con or something like that.
Yeah.
I would love to see the full version of that subjectively, because back then is when I found out about what was really happening. And if people today really knew the truth, I don't think most people could handle it, nor can they or will they believe it. That's the other thing to it. But before I was the housing chair for the state conference NAACP of Maryland, I had my own for-profit company, which was $1 million company, which taught financial literacy. So we taught credit restoration, debt arbitration, financial planning, preparation for bankruptcy, rehabilitation after bankruptcy, identity fraud. We would go in and we would do settlements, like on people's credit reports. We would contact their creditors. We would pay their debts off right then and there. We were a member of Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. So we would report our trade lines, the services that we offered, and also the loans that we paid the debts off with. Now, I didn't hand any money to you in your hand. I just went in and paid all the creditors off on the credit report. And back then, that's when all of those creative loans were going on. I guess a lot of the subprime lending was happening and all of that. Subjectively, my business had a relationship with all the 5 major banks, realtors all around the United States, mortgage companies all around the United States, title companies all around the United States. My only competition was Susie Orman, if you know who that is. She was my only competition in the financial literacy game. I also started a nonprofit which taught financial literacy in the public schools and the private schools. And we taught about financial literacy, but we also talked about being self-sufficient. And we also talked about being business owners, which was really, really important to my mission and my vision in creating awesome human beings in the young community. We also did some financial literacy things with some colleges in Maryland as well. So I had all of that going on the side. And then, like I said, I became the housing chair for the Prince George's County NAACP. And then the state conference asked me to come on because I was making waves. So they asked me to come on to be the housing chair for the state NAACP, and I agreed. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that they would abandon me. Like I knew that I was isolated and insulated. I knew that the NAACP had a huge following, a large membership, and not to mention they were all around the United States. So I wasn't worried because in my mind, I had this army behind me. Even though some people were trying to tell me the NAACP is not what you think, but I just didn't believe it, and I just didn't see it at that particular time. In the meantime, I was all over the news, asking the governor at the time to, please give us a moratorium to freeze these illegal foreclosures that was happening. I was asking the state's attorney at the time, the state's attorney of Maryland at the time, to please, give us a moratorium. And they was really giving, me a hard time. But, I'm a fighter, and, in my mind, it wasn't the homes that I was trying to save. In my mind, it was the Black family structure that I was trying to save. It was these were Black husbands and Black wives and Black children. And, I say it on other interviews, the rumor is Black men don't marry Black women. Black men only make babies with Black women. Well, these were Black families. These were husband and wives and children, and they were destroying the Black structure. Not to mention, it was Black families that was living in the woods. And I went in the woods. Well, first I had to get permission from the people in the woods to be able to go into the woods and to hear their stories. And I went back to politicians telling them, look, it's families that lost their homes to illegal foreclosures and blah, blah, blah. And you got to go see them. We got to help them. We got to do this, and, I was all over the news just telling it all, but I was green. Like, I didn't understand how dangerous the industry was. And I didn't understand what was really, really going on at first. I just didn't get it. And I remember one day I went to my nonprofit, and it was this package at my door, and it was a big, huge envelope, and it was like a report, and it had like almost 1,000 pages. And it was a man, I can't remember the man's name, but he was in front of the Senate or Congress, I can't remember, and he was testifying on how the foreclosure industry happened, what happened in the beginning, who all was involved with it, and what actually happened. And I read page by page by page, and it just blew me away. And I Googled this man, and I found his the recording on C-SPAN, where he was testifying and speaking on what happened. And I was trying to tell people about it, and they didn't want to believe me, like mainly the NAACP. Like, we need to do more, we need to do more. And they wouldn't accept what I was saying. And I was trying to figure out, I wonder why are they stalling like this? What's really going on? And then it got to the point where I started getting strange phone calls, in the middle of the night, people calling my office and just holding the phone and, calling me the N-word. And then I started realizing I was being followed, and I got ran off the road quite a few times in the middle of the night, leaving from my office. They was coming in and out my homes, not knowing at that particular time I had the feds following me on one end, and then I had the bank investigators following me on the other side. And I remember when I would go and give speeches and stuff like that, white men with suits on would come in and take pictures of me, and it was just so odd. And I remember one day I was coming in the building of my office, and it was a white man standing there with some sunshades on, and I can't remember what he had on or whatever. And I had a meeting that I had to go to, so I went upstairs to get my report or whatever the situation was. And then when I came back downstairs, it was another man standing in the same place with the same outfit on, but he was taller. And I was on my cell phone, and I had my briefcase in my hand, and I stopped and I looked at him, and I told the person on the phone, I'm like, is this man standing here? And he was standing here before, but he's not the same man, but he don't think I realized that. And he just kind of looked at me, but it was a different guy. So they was surveilling me 24 hours a day. I used to stand at my window, and I lived alone at that time. And I would stand at my bedroom window at night, and I would watch these men running around in my yard and stuff. And I remember telling the NAACP, look, I need bodyguards. I need bodyguards. I need a driver. I need to be protected, you know. And I couldn't understand why they was not protecting me. Not to mention, I started when it was time for me, towards the end, when I would go on the news to do interviews, the last few times I had to meet with, like, I had to be briefed before I went into the newsroom to be interviewed. And I thought that that was kind of strange. And then I was told, okay, we need you to not make this a Black thing, that it's not just the Black community that's being affected by these illegal foreclosures, is, you know, everybody's being affected. And I didn't think about it that much back then, which it was a fact, but I didn't think about it until just recently. In the last couple of years, I thought about Martin Luther King and how he brought in the other races or whatever. But I still haven't figured that piece of the puzzle out. I guess maybe the news media wanted me to bring awareness that it wasn't just people of color, or was it another tactic? I don't know. But when I think back, I mean, I suffer from extreme PTSD, and all of that stuff just really scare me. But I just remember those days. I also did a huge march on Annapolis, you know, trying to get this moratorium. Over 5,000 families showed up, you know, fighting to keep their homes. Not to mention, I saved over 800 and something families from illegal foreclosures. And how I did that, you know, I would just call the judge's chamber. I would call the judge's chamber. I would call the actual presidents and vice presidents of the bank, letting them know. And I'm not talking about the regional president or the regional vice president. No, I would call the president or vice president of the bank saying, this is illegal. You know, you don't have the promissory note. You know, it's bundled up, it's being traded on Wall Street. You know this, you know that, blah, blah, blah. And they would give the home back. So a lot of that went on. Not to mention, as I kept going on the news, I received a phone call from one of the most powerful men in Maryland. And he told me that I needed to go back on the news to say that there was no foreclosure issues in Maryland. And he gave me the reason why, which blew my mind, which is going to be in my book, which come out in April. And because if I say it now, then people are going to know who it is. But he told me why, but that wasn't my problem. So he called me again, and then he got somebody under him to call me. And when the person under him called me, he asked me how much did I want. No, excuse me. He asked me, what did I want? And I said, well, I want a moratorium to freeze the foreclosures in the state of Maryland. And he was like, well, what else do you want? Well, and I'm so green, I didn't get what he was saying to me. I said, well, I want a commission set up to investigate these illegal foreclosures that are going on in the Black communities. I want to know why and how this has happened. And I want to sit on that commission. And he said, well, what else do you want? And I said, that's it. That's what I want. Not knowing, when I look back now, they was asking me about a bag. Like, how much money did you want? That's what they were asking me. They was asking me to sell my people out. And I couldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Even if I understood at that time what they were talking about, because I really did, I was green. I really didn't know what he was talking about. But even if I understood that, I still couldn't do that. I can't be one of those type of people. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Today, I can look in the mirror at myself, you know what I'm saying, and not feel a certain type of way. But moving right along.
Let me ask you. I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Let me ask you a question about how were they illegally foreclosing on people? Like, I mean, what was the process, and how did it come about? Like, what was it that what did that look like?
Well, I don't want to go all into details, but what I can tell you is that the city was part of it, the county was part of it, the state was part of it, the feds were part of it. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just, they said that it was the subprime mortgages. It wasn't just that. It was bigger than that. Everybody was making money off those illegal foreclosures. Everybody was making money off the foreclosures that were happening. Not to mention, they couldn't foreclose legally because they didn't have the promissory notes, because the promissory notes were bundled up and being traded on Wall Street. So the only way that you could foreclose, you had to have all the documentation. Well, you didn't have the promissory note because the promissory note was gone. The promissory note was bundled up, sold on Wall Street, and they say the Chinese and the Arabs bought all that paper, all that dead paper, because the market was up, and all of a sudden the market crashed, and then that's when that's when hell broke loose, because they had sold all those promissory notes.
Yeah, that's oh man, it's when you really start digging into this, and if you anybody out there, check out the con. It's, and I'll put up the website to it on the screen here at some point, but that really gives you a good picture of how this whole thing became to be. I mean, it was all about the Wall Street was trying to get these subprime mortgages, and so they needed to bundle them all up, like you were saying, and so they were incentivizing everybody below them. So everybody that touched that mortgage, and you come in when you've got that family that can't really afford the house, and they know they can't afford it, and if they didn't outright just fraudulently do the loan, they would have you come in and make them whole on paper again, right?
Whoa, let's back up a second. So, I've been a business owner over 20 something years, a successful business owner. And, my thing is financial literacy. And so when I first started my company, you had to have over 680, 720 credit score and higher to be able to get a mortgage. So as time went on, the requirements started loosening up, and the score started getting lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. So I'm from the old school. My parents own their home. My grandparents on both sides own their home. My great grandparents on both sides own their home. I come from a generation of homeowners, landowners, business owners, etc. So my thing was, if you can't buy your home with cash, then you don't need to be buying a home. Like, I did not believe in getting a mortgage. That's just what it was. I didn't believe in that. Not to mention, all my clients I put on household budgets. So I knew how much they was bringing in. I knew how much their monthly bills were, what their expenses was, how much they had saved in the bank. So as time went on, the requirements started dropping, and they started loosening up their guidelines. And that's when those mortgage companies started coming up with all these creative mortgages. Not to mention, subjectively or consequently, it was a lot of families that was here in the state of Maryland who had credit scores that was 780, 800. They didn't need those creative mortgages. They didn't need subprime mortgages. They was put in subprime mortgages, and they didn't need them. I had a private side to my company, and I had a corporate side to my company. So you would come into my office and you would get financial literacy services. It would be considered as the private side. But if you came in as a realtor, or you came in as a mortgage company, or you came in as a bank, you would come in with all your files. I would never see your clients. So you would come in with just your files. So as time went on, I noticed that it was more and more realtors and mortgage companies and banks. They started coming in by themselves opposed to sending their clients in, because they didn't need their clients to go through the whole process of a household budget and this and that and all that kind of stuff. All they needed was for me to add my services on their credit report, pay off a few things on their credit report, and that was it. Back then, people that had credit scores of 450 was able to buy a home if they had 2 pay stubs. Whereas when I first started my company, it wasn't like that. You had to have tax returns. You had to been on your job for a certain amount of time. You had to have a certain amount of money in the bank. But when all these creative mortgages came out, this subprime lending came out, and then not to mention, remember, the equity was going up real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden it just flopped. And so I never was one, I was always preaching to my clients, why don't you start a business opposed to going to get a mortgage to buy a house? Why don't you buy a business? I mean, why don't you start a business? And I help lots of families start a business. You know what I'm saying? Create businesses in the state of Maryland. So my thing I wasn't into them purchasing homes unless they could afford to buy them cash. And like I said, I thought it was odd when the score requirements started dropping. Like, who is going to sell a house to someone with a credit score of 450, 500? And at that time, all you needed was 2 pay stubs, a heartbeat, and whatever, you know. And it was disgusting to watch, because I wasn't an advocate for home ownership. Now, land, that's a whole different thing. Land ownership and having a business are have always been my 2 things, because that is what was instilled in me from my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, moving on back. So I was caught up in the riffraff after I became the housing chair for the state conference NAACP of Maryland.
Yeah, that's when you start digging into this whole thing a little bit more, and you start realizing like how dirty it was, how far it went up, what exactly, you know, a lot of these banks with what they would do, and they're still doing it now, and we're about to see another surge here. You know, I know he put the moratorium off to the 31st of March, but I mean, what are you really doing? All you're doing is just you're prolonging the inevitable and letting these people dig themselves in a deeper hole that they're not going to be able to get out of. Because if you're not paying it now, and you haven't been paying it up to this point, I mean, let's just say you got a $1,500 mortgage and you're not paying it, and it's been what, almost going on a year here in March. So it will be a whole year. So you mean to tell me you're going to have to come up with a whole year's worth of payments at 15 times 12? I mean, that's up past 10, like almost 20 grand maybe.
So I consider these as wrongful foreclosures, whereas back then it was illegal foreclosures, because they was just doing all types of fraud back then. So now COVID hit, pandemic, blah, blah, blah. So now I label these as wrongful foreclosures. And you're right, to just put a Band-Aid on the situation is just effed up. And I try not to, because I was so traumatized by being the housing chair and all of that kind of stuff. I try not to think about it. Like, I get emails, I get phone calls, I get messages on not on Instagram, but Twitter and Facebook. And it traumatizes me. It's like, I don't even want to deal with it. But, you know, I try to answer people's questions and direct them in the right direction. But I mean, to put a Band-Aid on it and people are getting ready to be evicted from their apartments and their homes are just horrible. It's just absolutely horrible. And my hearts really go out to them. And it's more that we could be doing, or it's more that our government need to be doing, and they are not. And if people, even Stevie Wonder, can see that they just giving us peanuts. Not to mention, and I'm not Democrat or Republican, I say that all the time, but Trump got on TV and he said, this is the reason why I didn't sign this stimulus package. This is all the junk that's in here. And he read it. And people still wanted him out. People still wanted to boot him out. Not saying I wanted him to stay, but I'm just saying. And then here it is. We now look at where we at. We.
Yeah, I mean it's we're heading down a collision course, and people don't really understand it because they get fooled by the theater that they see in front of you, which is the national scene. Which, I mean, honestly, and I get caught up in it too, man. I got to be honest, because it's hard not to. You know, when you're watching the news, I don't know if anybody else feels the same way about this, but when you're watching the news, I feel like if you're paying attention to the politics, American politics, like you're in an abusive relationship. You know, and every time you turn on the news and they start bombarding you with everything, it's like, damn, man, you're getting traumatized each time you turn that box on, because it's the same thing, just repetitive. And it's being framed in a certain way. And all of the media seems to be in on it. And they're framing things in a way where if you know what's going on and you can't stand it, you tune out. And if you're tuning out, then that's another place that they want you to be, because if you ain't paying attention, then you're not paying attention and you don't know. And, you know, then there's the other group that's paying attention so closely to it and not paying attention to the other side of it, which is alternative media, other sources of information. So you can kind of maybe piece together some truth, you know, by hearing the other side. But a lot of those people aren't listening to the other side. They're just listening to what's being fed to them. And I was listening to Jordan Peterson and another individual having a debate, and it was really interesting, you know, because they talk a lot about history and you know, fascism and what different societies, when fascism started and all of that stuff, man. And it was really interesting to see the I guess you would call it the similarities of what happened in the past, and the past always repeats itself. And there's a reason. And I started thinking about this myself too. Like when I was in my my early 20s to my 30s, you know, I wasn't paying attention to anything. But you know, the significant things, like the savings and loan thing happened. That was the first act of what we're witnessing right now. Then you had 2008, and that was the second act of this. Now you've got this one here, which is the third act. But everything has a pattern. And if you've been around long enough, by the time you're in your 30s, maybe your late 30s into your 40s, you start realizing, whoa, wait a minute, that happened. That's not it. You just and then you can't wrap your mind around it, because you don't want to think or believe that somebody's capable of doing that, but they are. I mean, just think about it. You kick somebody out of their house, you illegally foreclose on them. The bank takes that property back, and then they turn around and flip it again. They did that to 5 million families in the first one in 2008. 5 million families lost their homes. And if you don't know somebody that did, you know somebody who was affected. That's how big this thing was. So how did you end up getting caught up in the conspiracy? Because that's really what it was, right? It was a conspiracy.
You know, it was the strangest thing. I remember when I was first raided, and I was thinking this has to be a mistake. Like, I mean, I knew all these politicians. I had them on speed dial. I went to Christmas parties with judges and the prosecutors and all kinds of stuff like that. And I just knew when it first happened, it was some type of mistake. I paid taxes, I kept my money in the bank, for years and years and years in the same account. And, I did everything the right way, every single thing the right way. And so when they raided me, I just knew this is a mistake. It's going to work itself out, and I went and hired, one of the top attorneys in Maryland, and And we went and sat down with the assistant state's attorney, and he was like, everything looks good, but we're going to go through your books one more time. These are some of the best books that we've seen in a long time. And, and I'm a Virgo, so I got everything organized. Everything is really, really organized. And my CPA had been with me for years. My corporate attorneys had been with me for years. My little Methodist bookkeeper had been with me for years. My computer guy, everybody was a close-knit family. And, so then I noticed, months was going by, and they had took a large sum of money from me. And so months was going by, and then a year went by, and I'm like, look, you need to ask them to give me my money back. And so when I started asking them for my money back is around the same time that I was on my high of demanding a moratorium for the people. And next thing I know, I was indicted. So when they raided me, they didn't indict me. They just took my money. I didn't go to jail or anything like that. And trying to figure out, well, that's odd. What's going on with that? And so when they indicted me, my attorney was like, do you know anything about these properties? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about it. I don't know what this is. So anyway, moving right along, they charged me 24 counts of mortgage, bank, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. They slid me in a case with 14 Tanzanians. And the two head Tanzanians were realtors. So I knew who they were. And by this time, this was 2014. So 2007 or 2008, one of them came to my office, and when I put the information through Equifax, when I put that person's client's information in through Equifax or Experian system, it came up deceased. So I threw him out my office, and I told him to never come back to my office again. And my office door had it had a two-way door on it, so you couldn't see inside, but I could see outside. So whenever somebody rung our doorbell, we could see who it was. And so if it was him, I would be like, don't let him in. So, I blocked his calls, all kinds of stuff like that, because I ran a clean business. So anyway, when they tried to get me to take a plea, the feds, the first plea was for 30 years, and I still didn't understand what was going on, nor did I know anything about these properties. The second plea, I don't know what that was. The third plea was 10.5 years, and I still refused to take a plea. I'm like, why would I take a plea for something I didn't do? I don't know anything about these properties. I don't know nothing about this. And they kept pressing the attorneys to get me to take the plea, and I refused. I'm like, let's go to trial, not knowing that, they had something called a blue ribbon jury, or they got like special juries set aside for special cases when they want to bust you in your head. And keep in mind, just to round the numbers off, the feds got a 98% conviction rate. And it's not because they won, it's because most of these people took pleas. Now, the other 2%, which is me and the other folks, the 2%, probably like maybe like a 0.5%, which are the white guys, or get acquitted. And then the other 1.5 lose, which was me. Mm-hmm. They bust you in the head. You know what I'm saying? And it's funny because my trial supposed to have went into the following week. That's when my witnesses supposed to have came in. My CPA, my computer guy, my little Methodist bookkeeper, and a whole bunch of other people supposed to came in to testify for me. The feds went to their homes 5 a.m. during that week to tell them they didn't need to come to court, but I didn't know that. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is they stopped the trial that Friday. But let me tell you what happened. This was February 2015, but I can't remember which day. And it was a lot of snow on the ground. Like the snow was like up to our knees. So I had on my mink coat and I had my jewelry on or whatever. That Thursday, the bailiff whispered in my ear, and he said, don't wear that coat tomorrow and don't wear that jewelry tomorrow, which was Friday. But I didn't really think nothing of it because my trial supposed to have went into next week where my witness is supposed to come in to testify. But I didn't wear my mink coat and I didn't wear my jury or whatever. They deliberated that day, the next day. They soon as the jury, it took them probably like an hour and a half. It was less than 2 hours to come to 24 counts that I was guilty, 24 counts of mortgage banking wire fraud. Not to mention sitting through that trial, I knew nothing about none of those mortgage documents. Now, what they did show was they showed after credit reports. They didn't show before credit reports. They did do that. They showed after credit reports that only had my company's trade lines on it. But they didn't show the before credit reports where all the junk was deleted off or negotiated off from the creditors. Does that make sense? So it made it look like it was just my company's trade lines on the credit report. They wouldn't disclose that, okay, this is the before credit report and this is the after credit report. This woman was banging it out. She was the boss at credit. They didn't show that. They just showed the empty credit report with just my company's trade lines on it. That was all that they had from me. Now, the two head Africans, they both got on the stand. They both said she's not, and it's in the transcripts, if anybody want to investigate it, they both said she's not part of our Tanzanian community. She did not financially benefit, nor did she know about our scam. And then one of them said, but she worked on our client's credit. But I was licensed by the state of Maryland. I was registered with the Better Business Bureau. I was a member of Equifax TransUnion Experian. You know what I'm saying? I was, part of Brad and Dun and Bradstreet. I mean, I was the nine. I had insurance. I had all of that kind of stuff. So I was a bona fide business. You know what I mean? And then the other one said, well, she knew we were realtors. Well, I was working with realtors all around the United States. You know what I'm saying? And I was working with mortgage companies all around the United States, banks, the 5 major banks, title companies all around the United States. So it wasn't just by those two Africans saying that I didn't know about their scam. I didn't financially benefit, and she's not part of our Tanzanian community. The trial should have stopped. But based on my research now, I don't believe it was a real jury. It couldn't have been. It couldn't have been. It would have been no way they could have found me on 24 counts. Not to mention, soon as they deliberated and they said, and I'm standing there and they went down the line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 24, guilty, 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 guilty. And then they got escorted out of the courtroom. And then the marshals, they all jumped over the chairs, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I didn't even get the benevolence to handle my personal affairs, my business affairs, or anything. The prosecutor, who is the niece of the most powerful man in Maryland at that particular time, told the judge, who is a brother who went to Morehouse, whose grandfather is an activist, told the judge she is ISIS, she is a terrorist, she is dangerous. We have to protect our streets of Prince George's County. We have to protect our state. Do you know that judge had me arrested right then and there? And this was like his second case. But he knew something was wrong because I'm looking at him and he just kept shuffling his papers. He would not look at me. But to make it even worse, without me knowing, he had court ordered me to solitary confinement for 4.5 months. And the 4.5 months later was the sentencing. I did not know that I was not going home that day, because normally they give you a couple of months, you know what I'm saying? Especially if it's white collar, I heard women had up to a year before they turned themselves in. They arrested me right then and there. I'm a practicing Buddhist over 20-something years. I don't have nothing against. I've never been in the Middle East. I don't know where. I don't understand it. It blew my mind. Not to mention they drove me from Maryland into Washington, D.C., and they put me in D.C. jail. And they threw me in solitary confinement. And Sean, it was human fecal matter all over the walls, all over the floors. It was this teeny little metal room. And it was so cold because it was so much snow out there. And it was so cold. It was so cold. And I remembered dropping to my knees. And, you know, I grew up in Pentecostal. My mother, God rest her soul, she died December 18th. But I grew up a diehard Christian, and I fell to my knees with all that stuff on the floors and the walls and stuff. And I was just saying, Elo, Elo, lama sabachthani, Elo, Elo, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? You know, I've done everything you've asked me to do, you know, and I just couldn't believe that I was in that situation. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And, you know, I'm the type of, you know, woman, I like nice things and I like things to smell good. I'm sensitive to smells. But I was in that metal room with, I mean, I'm still traumatized by it. So the 8th day that I was there, the psychiatrist wanted to meet with me. And he was an African, so I was traumatized by just that alone. So he was asking, he would never look at me at first, and he was asking me questions. And then he finally put his ink pen down and he looked at me and he said, "Who are you?" And then I was told when I was going into transitioning in, you always give your inmate number or whatever. So I said, "Well, I'm inmate number, whatever the number was." And he was like, "No, who are you out there?" And then I said, "I'm Dr. Carmen Johnson. I'm the housing chair for the state conference NAACP, blah, blah, blah." So he started Googling me, and then he was looking, and then he looked at me and he said, "Look," he said, "I'm going to get fired. You're not going to see me again." And then he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I've been court ordered to keep you in solitary confinement in that room for 4.5 months until your sentencing." He said, "But I'm going to release you into general population so you can fight to get out of here." And I was floored. I could not believe that this brother, this Black judge that went to Morehouse did this to me. I couldn't believe that he had did this to me. Not to mention, I was already in that situation. I couldn't believe the NAACP had did this to me. I couldn't believe, it was like, where are the protesters at? What, you know, what's going on? You know, and my sisters were living in South Carolina. They still live in South Carolina. They had to drive up through the snow to get to me, where I finally got to a phone, and I called them and I'm like, "You got to get to my office. You know, my checkbook is laying out. The business checkbook is laying out on the business, you know, desk, in my office. You got to do this, you got to do that, blah, blah." And I'm the oldest, and I've always been the head of my family. And at that point in my life, my two sisters had to take control. Like, I was just a nervous wreck. Like, I was traumatized. I couldn't believe that I was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be, and I definitely understand when I've been raided before, and it is a traumatic experience being locked up, especially if you haven't been locked up before in your entire life and you don't even know what that world is like. I can imagine it could be very traumatizing as well. But what it sounds like is that you weren't willing to play ball with them, and then they taxed you for your money at first, and then it's like, okay, well, now we're gonna, and by, you know, taking you out of Maryland and taking you to DC, that's removing you away from anybody that you could help fight. And then by putting you in solitary confinement, you're not able to do anything because they make it difficult for you to be able to make phone calls, to be able to do anything. And so that further removes you from society to where you can't fight. And then it shuts you up to where you have you can't do anything other than accept what they give you. And you know, obviously you got close to something and you know, were being punished. So since you've gotten out, I mean, if they went to those lengths to do that to you, to keep you from being able to tell the truth about what you found in that whole situation, I mean, do you have any fears now of coming out? Or
Well, hold that thought right there. I'm going to show you something. You don't know I know this, but I have that book.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
I was introduced to this book. Well, I mean, I'm a scholar of metaphysics, science of the mind, and mental science. And I found this book buried in the library of the prison camp that I was at, but it was several chapters that was tore out. But I read the book over and over and over again. So it's funny that you have that up there and you and I had not talked about it. Anybody that see that, they need to read Power versus Force. It is hot. But anyway, well, I'm a practicing Buddhist, and my story has to be told in order to help others. Even though I'm not getting the support that I feel that I should be getting from the community, I left people behind the wall. Even though I was in a camp, it's people that are in prison, it's people that are in jails, it's people that are in cages, it's people that are in camps, male and female and juveniles, that only a person that have gone through it and know where the landmines are can assist. Most people that come home, they just want to just forget about it. They don't want to talk about it, and that's that. I don't want to forget. I am innocent. I maintain that. I have begged that the president of the United States, whether it's Trump or Biden, to investigate my case and grant me a pardon while I'm still going through the court system, the injustice court system. Now I'm on my way to the Supreme Court. I'm writing this book. And my thing is, I'm not afraid to die for what is right. And what is right is the fact that Lady Justice is not blindfolded. This is an injustice system. What has happened to me, what has happened to so many men and women and our youth is so disgusting. That's why when I heard that executive order that President Biden was talking about, not doing a contract with the private prisons or the DOJ, that's only 8%. That you're not talking about those 8 crime bills and 7 of them you had something to do with. Now, if he had said that, if he put that in the executive order, now I respect you. But you talking about, most people don't understand. They think he said something great, and this executive order is something great, and it's not. My people are suffering. When I say my people, I'm saying the human race is suffering behind those walls. And I was in a camp, and I was drugged on the floor. I was strangled by guards. I was burnt on my forehead. I was chased, and I'm 54. So I was 51, 50 when this happened. I'm being chased around the compound like a baby deer with those racist white guards. I mean, it was horrible. So people are suffering, and they are suffering even more since this COVID. They are suffering even more. So for him to boast about an executive order that's talking about the Department of Justice is not going to take contracts from private prisons, that don't do nothing.
No, actually, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was going to say, yeah, it doesn't, because all of the contracts are in the federal system. So Unicor is almost in every single federal penitentiary, medium, even camps, because I know they got some call centers in some camps as well. He's not talking about doing away with those at all.
No.
That's business as usual. I mean, a lot of times, a lot of these conspiracies, especially the drug ones, I've talked to some people, and I have 10 interviews with 10 people that are currently serving time in federal prison right now on a drug conspiracy, which, they were getting 15, 25, 35 years. I mean, for drugs. I mean, I've seen people, kill people and get less time than that. And the very reason why they do is because, one, they can't fight for themselves. They're usually poor people, white, black, brown. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with class, because if you're poor, you can't fight for yourself. And guess what? The 98% conviction rate, you ain't fighting the feds, plus all of the, misconduct by the lawyers and prosecutors and everything else to get your ass in there. Once you get there, they've got an employee for years now, and they can move you from place to place to place. And it doesn't matter where they move you in the federal system. There is a unicorn at some point, and you will, even if you don't want to, you will be forced to, because at some point you're going to be like, I need money. Your family's going to stop supporting you if you've been there for a long period of time. You will bend to their will. And it's just nothing more than an arm of coercion and an arm of quieting people that are making waves. I spent time in Sheridan, Oregon, at FCI Sheridan, and that was a medium. And I was in there with a gentleman named Fritz Springmeier, who wrote the book called Bloodlines of the Illuminati and the Watchtower Society and everything that, all of that conspiracy theory stuff, a lot of that stuff is true. There's truth to it, or else people wouldn't be talking about it. But he got thrown in there as a bank robber, and he's a published author. He's published quite a few books before that even happened. And same thing, he just got too close to something, and they just like, all right, well, we're gonna do something and shut you up. And then anytime that he would talk about his situation, because he would get into the GED, because he was a smart guy, right? He was a professor, whatever, and he'd start teaching GED. And the minute he would start talking about his case or anything that had to do with it, they would wrap him up and send him somewhere else. So, you don't think that these prisons or anything are, they're used to shut people up too. There are the ones that are doing wrong, but it's horrible, man. And like I said, you start digging far enough into this stuff, and you will not believe what you find.
It's so weird, and I don't mean to offend anyone. I did extensive study on, Germany and the 30s and the 40s and Hitler and the Holocaust and the Jewish people and what was done to them, the disgusting things that was done to them. And I feel like now it's like we're living in a bunch of propaganda. We're living in censorship. It feels, even though, I wasn't born in the 30s or the 40s, but it's starting to feel like we're going in that direction. And it's so scary. And, and me being a practicing Buddhist, I'm supposed to have no feeling. I'm supposed to be right there in the middle. You know what I'm saying? But the things that I'm seeing and hearing is scary. It's scary. And the government has too much control when here it is, we're paying our tax dollars, and then we're paying for the police paycheck. We're paying for the politicians' paycheck. We're paying for all of their pensions. We're paying the judge's paycheck, his pension and her pension. And then they are arresting us or our family or our friends, and it's the craziest stuff. And it's one thing, which I'm not a judge of anybody, you know what I mean? But it's one thing to go to jail, prison, camps, cages for something you may have done, but it's a whole different mindset to go when you hadn't done nothing. And I did 3 years on 24 counts. And it was women that was there that had one count that was doing 10 and 12 years. But that 3 years felt like 30 years to me. Even though I was fighting while I was there, it felt like 30 years to me. And that's 3 years I can't get back. So am I afraid for me speaking out? I'm not afraid, but I'm a little nervous because I'm female. I'm a woman. I do feel unprotected. I need the protection of my men. I need the support of my community. And but I have to tell my story because my story will ultimately help others.
And I honestly think that a lot of things are turning that way. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming out. You can't deny a lot of stuff that you're seeing right now. And there's so much alternative media out there that is telling the other sides of these stories. Because honestly, I mean, if I heard a statistic not too long ago, and it said nine billionaires control, or it's like maybe nine or five. It's like a handful of billionaires control the media. So everything, like not all of it, but like 80, let's just say 85% of the media out there is owned by 9 people. So everything that's consumed in the mainstream is coming from a group of 9 people. And so the only way that we're ever going to combat this type of I don't know, the way that they're shaping everything, the only way that we can combat that is with our own media, which is like what I do, or other people out there that are doing the same thing. It's all these voices and all these stories that will make their way to people's ears, and enough people, when they start hearing certain things, I mean, even if they're not really even listening, we're planting seeds all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And all it takes is somebody from their own community or their own peer group to mention something that maybe I had mentioned, or you had mentioned on a show that they had seen prior. And they go, oh, wait a minute, I heard that before. And they hear it enough times, then they start going, that's when the awakening starts happening. Because when they start hearing it from their own peer group, and they hear it more than 2 or 3 times, then that sets off a bell, and they go, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Let me look into this. And then they start, figuring out what's going on. But I mean, it's a slow process. They've really got it pretty hemmed up, with the mainstream media. So we got a couple comments here. I'm not sure who the Facebook user is that sent this comment, because it just says user. It doesn't say a name. So the first one is, that's why awareness is the key to anything that, we're doing and you see. And then it goes, but that's where it starts. It begins with violating the guilty rights. Then they do it to the innocent. And another one, that's correct. We need our own media. So yeah, I mean, and I do this, like anybody that wants to know how to podcast or wants to learn how to podcast or has questions about it, I'm always willing to help people, and point them in the right direction of how to do this. I mean, I've tied my own podcast to the nonprofit that I started, and for bringing people. I haven't done everything for it yet, but I mean, at some point it's going to involve teaching people, having a studio, and having guys that are coming out of incarceration back into the communities, and teaching them how to have a podcast, how to get your voice back, because that's really what it's about. It's about retaking your voice back that's been stolen from you. And it's not everybody. Look, some people, they go to prison and they did what they were supposed to do. They did what they did. They did their time, and then they come back. The sad thing is that once you go, that isn't it. The crime, the time, it isn't over. I know that I got statements to you who we are friends. Okay, thank you, Kevin Haynes. So Kevin Haynes is the one who sent those. Thank you. I appreciate the comments and appreciate you tuning in to the broadcast. But yeah, it's man, there's so many different facets of everything, man. It's crazy. They call it the octopus. All right, so let's just take the world and the elites. There's an octopus, and there's 8 legs of everything. You got the judicial, you've got the insurance companies, you've got the financial, you've got the military industrial complex, you've got the big oil, you've got pharma, and it's just wrapped around the world. And it ain't, it ain't getting any more equal. It's getting worse, if nothing. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. We're at about an hour right now. Is there anything that you wanted to cover that we hadn't talked about yet? I know you've got a GoFundMe and you've got a petition that you've almost got 1,000. I know you've gotten quite a few since that last.
Since the help of Mr. Clifton, Mr. Jones, and Ms. Riley, and now you, yeah. But I mean, almost 50,000 views and only 800 and something signatures. That the math doesn't add up to me. And usually on my backdrop is the universe, but on this live StreamYard, it doesn't give my cute little back drop thing. And I have to know that the universe got me. But one of the things that I want to just end with is the mental health standpoint of it, and how going to prison, jails, camps, and cages, it messes your mind up. It messes your mind up. I mean, here it is. I like to think that I'm a sophisticated woman, and I sleep on the edge of the bed, because for 3 years I slept on a teeny little bed. And I still eat out of bowl, and not a plastic bowl, but a ceramic bowl now. But I can't bring myself to eat out a plate. I don't know, and I still eat with a spoon. And I'm just being transparent. Like this, I call it prison trauma stress syndrome, PTSD. It really messed me up. Like if I'm driving and a police drive up behind me, I get the sweating and shaking. And I can't handle it. If I see a white man with sunshades on, I think they the feds. If I see a black man with a suit on, I think he the NAACP. Like, it really traumatized me. This is what our government did to me. This is what the state of Maryland did to me. This is what the BOP did to me. This is what Alderson Federal Prison Camp, I was at a camp, did to me. This is what the NAACP did to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's I dealt with my own PTSD from being in there as well, and having to like when I re-entered society, it was I had to decompress, and it wasn't easy, that's for sure. So basically, if you guys are paying attention out here, anybody who's watching this going forward, or if you're watching now, do me a favor, go into the description. All of these links, from the petition that's scrolling across right now, to the GoFundMe, to Dr. Carmen's website, the podcast suggestions that she gave, the book suggestions, her Instagram page, and even an affiliate for StreamYard. If you're a podcaster, if you're somebody who creates content out there and you like the way that this is set up, the StreamYard, go ahead and hit that affiliate link. You'll get yourself a $10 credit, and you'll also give me a credit too as well, and that'll help support the show. Like I said, any other way that you can help support the show, the basic way and the best way and the cheapest way is to basically subscribe, rate, and review. And anywhere, like on the podcast platforms, rate, review the show, subscribe on YouTube, share this story, go sign the petition, share this episode out as much as you can, and let's help Dr. Carmen fight this fight, because she's not the only one. She just happens to be one of the only ones that isn't afraid and wants to tell the truth and wants to get the truth out there and help other people. I mean, look, we're getting ready to come into a time where this is going to happen all over again. And with the CARES Act and all of these PPP loans and everything else that we're giving out, there's going to be a whole onslaught once this thing is over of investigations, and people are going to start going to prison for fraud on the back end of all of this. You can guarantee it. People that have taken out loans, PPP loans, and they didn't use them the right way or didn't read the fine print, if they did something wrong, they will be going after them. So I mean, we're far from over in this whole mess that we're in. So just keep that in mind, and don't be so quick to judge There's a lot of things that are happening out there, and a lot of things that happen, and people go to prison for, not always the reason why, or even for a reason other than, somebody trying to get them own selves out of trouble. We'll have a couple more of these. Cynthia Goldberg. She said, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I too was a victim of a white collar crime. Post incarceration syndrome is real. I experience all you two are going through. The system is broken. My heart goes out to you. The one part, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sure Dr. Carmen does as well. But the one correction I have to make on the system is broken. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly the way it's supposed to and the way it was designed to. That's the problem. That's the problem with, Biden doing the little bit that he's doing to try and pacify the criminal justice reform people. Because if he really cared about criminal justice reform, he would be reversing all of the mandatory minimums that he signed in 94 on that crime bill.
7 of them.
Yeah, he would be reversing those. He didn't do anything then. He didn't do anything when he was, he did something then that created a huge problem, but he didn't do anything anytime after that. And the years, and even in the 8 years that he was vice president, he didn't do anything. So, I mean, I know everybody wants to have that, we call it hopium. You know what I mean? You got that hopium that you're high on, hoping that, somebody's going to do something for you. The government's going to change anything. He already told you that fundamentally nothing was going to change. He said that out in public, out in the open. And that's exactly what's happening. Fundamentally, nothing is changing. I mean, we're going back into Syria. We're going to be going into more wars now. The other things are going to be happening. The $1,400, or actually the $2,000 that was promised, went to $1,400. And now I'm going to negotiate the $1,400. So, I mean, these people don't care about us. All right. They don't. They could care less. You've got other countries right now that are taking care of their citizens and giving, a lot of them, they're getting 80% of their rate of pay for staying home. What did we get? We got, I think, 1,200, 600, so 1,800 in 1 year. And who's in the third world country?
So can't get scared now. It's time to start standing up for ourselves. But when I read this one here, the mental health is an issue. Yes, I still cook out the microwave. That's why I had chuckled when I read that. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. The post trauma is real. It's real. Yeah.
Kevin had made the statements. I also signed the petition. Well, thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, I think we've covered pretty much enough here, and we can probably come back and cover a whole nother show's worth of stuff as well. We definitely need to hang out once I take us out. I will talk to you in a minute, but I'm going to pull us out and end this show. And like I said, if you've been tuning in, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the interaction. And let's do Dr. Carmen a solid and sign that petition. If you can afford it, go to the GoFundMe and try to help support in that way. But if nothing else, just share this. Yeah, sign and share. Sign and share, man. That's exactly what we need. So thank you again for coming out, Dr. Carmen. I really appreciate you being on the show. And until next time, guys, I will see you later. Let's go. Which one is it? Oh, no, it's this one. All right. Bye.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at nowhere to go but up now. On Twitter at but up now. On the YouTube channel at nowhere to go but up podcast. See you next time.